toolbox, the marketing mix, which is promotion. So just to recap, when we looked at the product variable, we were looking at the good that we create and exchange with our customers. When we looked at price, we are talking about what we expect in exchange, the value that we attach to that good. And then in place, of course, we're looking at how we get the good into the hands of our customer. With promotion, we're looking at making the customer, number one, aware that we have something to sell them, and two, equally importantly, helping them understand why our product is worth the price that we are requiring to exchange it, and why our product is different and superior to alternative and substitute products offered by our competitors. This slide should look familiar to you because we looked at it when we considered pricing strategy. And what it shows here is that our ability to capture the true economic value of our products is dependent on the amount of effort and investment that we place in bringing our products to market. And it says marketing expenditure there, and certainly there are implications for product development and pricing strategy and distribution channel design and management. But most of the money that we spend in marketing tends to be in the promotional side. And we see this in our experiences. Products that are more aggressively, creatively promoted usually are able to command higher price premiums than those that have very little awareness or preference in the marketplace. So there's a direct relationship between the amount we invest in promotion and our ability to command a price premium. When we think about promotion, we often think about advertising because, of course, that's the glamorous part of the promotion variable. And some of these classic advertisements that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you're not, but this Volkswagen ad was designed back in the 1960s by a man named Bill Bernbach. And I'm going to share with you a video a little bit later on. Actually, it's actually available now in Blackboard. You can watch it. That describes the history of some of these classic ads and how revolutionary they were. At this point in time in advertising history in the United States, most ads were cluttered. You had multiple script fonts and just very noisy ads that used every square inch of space. And when Bernbach designed this Volkswagen ad, it was considered to be revolutionary in that so most of the ad was just white space, or what graphic designers call negative space. And of course, what that does is it forces your eye to concentrate on the few bits of information that are provided. In this case, the really tiny Volkswagen Bug vehicle and the clever and whimsical headline, Think Small. And what's very interesting about this is this happened relatively shortly after the end of World War II. Bill Bernbach himself was Jewish, and the advertising community thought it very strange that a creative director with Jewish origins would be willing to take on work from the German auto manufacturer Volkswagen. And in fact, the Volkswagen Bug was Hitler's idea to provide a car for the common people. A little interesting little advertising history factoid. Another ad campaign you may be familiar with, the Marlboro Man, this classic Philip Morris campaign that ran for years, and we'll look at how effective that campaign was. But again, these are visuals that I would imagine that you are familiar with. Question that you might be asking yourself, is advertising effective? And there are numerous examples that we could look at. These are just a few of them. I mentioned the Marlboro Man campaign a moment or two ago. When this campaign launched, As you can see in the slide, it led to a 3,000% increase in sales in a single year. Now, for the company, that was a great thing, but you might think that's a bad thing given that the tremendous uptick in smoking. But that issue notwithstanding, Calvin Klein was having difficulty in launching its denim jeans product until they launched this ad with Brooke Shields, and at the time it was considered very risque and controversial. And what it did is it dramatically increased Calvin Klein's success in that marketplace, and they followed this same idea in launching their underwear products. And now we see this kind of thing as pretty common with companies like Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister. Of course, Coca-Cola, I think, is one of the best examples we can see of a company that has leveraged the power of advertising for decades to weave their product into the fabric of global culture. So the answer to the question, is advertising effective, is a resounding yes, if done correctly. Much of the advertising that we see, and we'll look at the reasons why in just a little bit, isn't effective. It's very expensive and it doesn't produce the results it's intended to, because the individuals that developed the advertisements didn't follow a rational process, or they just copied their competitors' ads, and as a result gave the marketplace no reason to choose them. But again, I'll provide you with a framework you can use to develop advertising and promotional messages that do create a difference. But all that to say, the promotion variable isn't just advertising. Again, that's the part we're most familiar with, but there's a lot more to promotion than advertising. That's interesting. That little box that just popped up at the top of the screen. I'm using new software that I've not used before to record this presentation, so I'm hoping we won't have too many more of those surprises. But the promotion variable is also referred to as integrated marketing communications. It encompasses all these different communication tactics that are available to us as marketers to communicate with our target audiences. And of course, they range all the things here you can read, but broadcast being both television and radio. And of course, now that's fragmented because we have streaming TV, we have satellite radio, we have internet radio, we have online options, and we're going to look at some of these in more detail. But just to make the point that there are a lot of different tactics that are available to us as we consider how to leverage the promotional variable, and usually when we're creating a promotion plan and taking into consideration the audiences that we're speaking to, we will use a number of these different tactics at any one point in time. Not usually have enough money to do all of them at the same time, but certainly we try to deploy multiple tactics so we can reach those audiences in numerous different ways, and hope that if we integrate, which is the idea of integrated marketing and communications, not just marketing communications, but we integrate everything that we do when we communicate with the marketplace, so that the net effect is a greater chance that they recognize the message that we're sending them. They recognize that it's our company sending that message, and that because the messages that are sent through various media, whether it be a television ad or whether it be a salesperson talking to them in a retail setting or on the phone or through chat, or whether it's a billboard they see, because we communicate the same message in the same way each time, we increase the likelihood that the audience is going to remember what it is we're saying, so that when they are in the market to make a purchasing decision, they remember our brand and our product and hopefully make a choice to purchase what we have to offer them. So that's why integration is so critical. As an example of that, California Baptist University 15 years ago did not have a marketing division. Each of its colleges were responsible to promote themselves to the marketplace. And what we had at that point, this is before I came on board, but what CBU experienced at that point was a very fragmented presentation in the marketplace. The business school had its logo, and it had its message it communicated to the market about what made it different and the products it offered and the services it offered that were different from what the School of Education was saying to the marketplace. And that's just those two. There were also other schools and departments who promoted themselves, and when the casual observer in the marketplace is looking at that, they would look at CBU and they weren't quite sure what we were doing, because there was such a variety of messages and logos and marks floating around down there. And so when the decision was made to consolidate all of CBU's marketing efforts into a single department or a single division, that allowed us to unify both how we presented ourselves to the marketplace, so not 10 different logos, but a single logo and a single coordinated message to the marketplace, so that so whenever the marketplace heard from us, they heard the same set of messages presented in the same way. And that consistency is important, because consistency communicates to your customer that you know what you're doing, and that inspires confidence in the customer's mind, and confidence is necessary if they are going to make a decision to spend their money with us. If we're inconsistent and fragmented, and our customers think that we're not coordinated internally, we don't know what we're doing, then they're not likely to spend their money with us. And if we were to unpack each one of those tactics, it gets even more complicated. There are a lot of different options within each of those tactics that we can choose from. So as we'll see in just a moment, the key is to know how to choose tactics that are appropriate for the markets that we're speaking to. Promotion at its most basic level is commercial communication, designed to first and foremost create awareness that our company exists, that we have a product that could be valuable to our customer segment, and then to help them understand why it's better than what our competitors are offering and why it's worth what we're asking for it. That's what commercial communication is. The chart here shows us various promotional tactics that are available to us, and the relationship between how close they get us to our customer and the cost for that closeness or that intimacy. And so you can see here on the far right corner, well, actually, let's start in the top left corner. We see sales. And sales efforts, when we employ people to work directly with customers, whether they're working with them over the phone or through a chat service, or as is common in business to consumer type situations, or in business to business situations, we might have sales representatives that travel to customer locations. So if you are a manufacturer of nuts and bolts and you sell those to companies like Boeing or Airbus or Embraer, those are high value items that are sold in large quantities, very precision manufactured. You would hire and compensate well salespeople to go to those companies and work with them directly. So that's very expensive. Employing people to do promotion is expensive, but sometimes it's the only way that business is done. And as you can see in this chart, it gets us very close to our customer. As I think I've mentioned in previous classes, the best marketing would be marketing plans designed for each and every one of our customers. But of course, that's not realistic or practical. It'd be far too expensive. There's no way that we could do that. So that's why we segment our market, identify the most attractive segments, and we focus our attention on those segments. So the sales tactic gets us very close to our customers, can be very effective, assuming we have effective and well-trained salespeople, but it's also very expensive. At the far extreme, in the lower right corner, is advertising. Now, advertising is very inexpensive. I can buy a 30-second television spot on local area cable in Riverside County, San Bernardino County, the Los Angeles region, and I can reach hundreds of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of customers at a very modest cost. Maybe running that spot one time might cost me just pennies per person who views the commercial. Of course, I don't know for sure if they did view the commercial, and if they did view it, were they paying attention to it? And then, of course, did they respond to it? That's more difficult to know. So while the price to advertise is far lower than personal selling, I'm able to reach a much larger area through advertising. The key is mixing these different tactics up to achieve the best possible outcome. This question should look familiar to you because that was from quiz 6. And so, which of the following are not elements of an integrated marketing communications plan? And by now, because you read, you know it's product prototyping. Product prototyping is part of the product variable, where we create working models of products that we can share with customers and see what they like and dislike about them. But all the other tactics here are part of the promotional variable, including public relations. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So we start in developing our integrated marketing community. So I'm going to use, going forward, use IMC, or integrated marketing communication, and promotion interchangeably. They mean practically the same thing. So integrated marketing communications is another term that we can use to refer to the promotional variable of the marketing mix. Objectives that we can achieve with this tactic: one, of course, we've talked about create awareness. We can share knowledge about how to use the product so that our customers can extract more value from it. Again, that goes back to the consumer decision process, where we understand that we want customers to be satisfied. We want them to use our products, to reflect on their use, and draw a positive judgment about their investment in those products. We can use integrated marketing communications to establish our position in the marketplace. Maybe we want to be known as the low-cost leader, or we want to be known as the high-performance provider, whatever that may be. Of course, we use integrated marketing communications to persuade customers to purchase our products, to make sales. And then also we want to reinforce behavior. We want our customers to come back and to us when they are next in the market to buy that product, or to expand the relationship. Many times companies misallocate marketing resources on winning new business and new customers, when that money might be better spent expanding, growing the relationships they have with their existing customers. So this 5-point approach helps us to ensure that the promotional or integrated marketing communications plans we create have maximum odds of success. And conveniently, they all begin with the letter M to make them more easy to remember for us. Market, of course, that's the audience that we need to communicate with in order to achieve our overall marketing goals. Message is the substance of what we say to them to get them to behave the way that we want them to. Now, behavior, of course, that ultimately means buying something from us, but there are a lot of intermediate steps along the way. The behavior that we need initially might just be to visit a web page and fill out a form, or call us, or go to an event. So there's those intermediate opportunities we have for conversion. We'll talk about what that means in just a little bit. That are also goals we can have. Media refers to the different communication tactics we looked at a few minutes ago that we can choose, and those are based on the ways that our target audience consumes information. Older, more educated, affluent people in the United States read newspapers. They don't spend as much time on social media, whereas high school students may not even recognize a newspaper if you showed it to them, but they spend vast amounts of time on social media. So again, choosing the tactic depends on the market that we want to communicate with. Money, of course, very practical, that will define which of these tactics we can invest in and how aggressively. And then measurement to ensure that we're getting value for the money that we're investing in our media plan. So let's start with market. Now, market we covered when we were talking about identifying your target segment, and this allows you to frame the message in a way that's relevant, understandable by that group. If we move on to the message development itself, one way that we can develop the message is what's called a means and chain analysis, and it goes back to what we talked about in the consumer decision process model, speaking not just to features, but to the end state values and outcomes and benefits that our customer is seeking to fulfill by purchasing our product. The graph here shows some of the end state values that our customers are aspiring to achieve, and gives us an idea of how we can frame our advertising message so that it will be relevant and attractive. As an example, if you were a dairy farmer and you wanted to sell milk, you could frame your message based on milk's nutritional benefits, that it has calcium, that it's refreshing when served cold, or you could show a picture of David Beckham without his shirt on, and that communicates all of these end state values depending on where you're coming from and how that image affects you, but it's a far more compelling way to communicate the benefit of drinking milk than simply listing off milk's features. And what we often refer to this message is the unique value proposition. I like to think of it this way, that if a prospective customer were to view my advertisement, whether it be a print ad or a television commercial or a postcard or something that a salesperson might communicate, what is the one thing that I want that person to understand and believe about what I have to offer them? And of course, this goes back to having a clear idea of who our audience is, so we can understand how this fits into the context of their lives, how it helps them solve the problems that they are trying to solve. An example of this is a billboard concept that we created for CBU years ago, I don't know, like 5 years ago, which sought to encapsulate the unique value that CBU has to offer students that differentiates our offering from the offerings of our near competitors. So I'm not honing down on specific programs or pricing or costs, convenience, but laddering up to a higher ideal, which changes the value proposition. Very similar to what Apple did in its Think Different campaign, which we've talked about, but instead of showing a computer and talking about components and performance specifications, Apple decided to connect their unique value proposition to an ideal, in that case, thinking different, in that in purchasing an Apple product, you were part of a movement, part of something bigger than just buying a commodity computer. And this brings us to another question that we want to ask and answer, because we've all seen advertisements, we've consumed them, that are either boring, they're irrelevant, they miss the mark, they don't connect. And we've seen those advertisements that are unforgettable, the types of advertisements that we often see during the Super Bowl. And the question is, does investing in creativity, whether it's the storyline of the ad or the way that the ad is presented visually, does that make an advertising message more effective, particularly in inspiring purchasing behavior? And a study was done recently, because up to the recent past, we didn't have any scientifically valid evidence that indicated that creative ads were in fact more effective in promoting sales activity than non-creative ads. But a group of researchers in Germany conducted a study just a few years back looking at hundreds of campaigns for a large number of different companies, and they used a model from the social sciences that enabled them to compare these different advertising messages and also look at the outcomes that those companies experienced and determine whether or not the creative attributes of those ads made a difference in their sales outcomes. And what they found, if I can advance to the next slide, what they found was that, as you can see there, highly creative ads had nearly double the sales impact of less creative ads. And again, this was by the measures that they were using. And in addition to that, and here's an example of one that we've seen before, Old Spice ads, that the idea of elaboration or messages that quickly shift from one idea to another idea in rapid succession are far more effective than advertising messages that may just sit on one idea for a lengthy period of time. And I think a lot of it has to do with our shorter attention spans. And is evidenced by the Kia Soul commercials, the hamster commercials that debuted in 2009, that advertising makes our marketing dollars stretch further. And Kia provides an interesting example of that because over the 5-year period that the hamster ads ran from 2009 to 2014, and they've been recently resurrected again because they were so effective, Kia was outspent by General Motors and Ford by about 10-1. But during that same period of time, their sales doubled, far outpacing Ford and General Motors sales growth and outpacing Toyota, who is their near competitor with the Scion brand. In fact, Toyota recently decided to discontinue Scion largely because Kia had overtaken that market, because Kia understood the values and the lifestyle of their target market and reflected them in their whimsical hamster ads. I've provided you a documentary called Art and Copy on the Blackboard page for week 6 that I would encourage you to watch, and please do not distribute. I provided it just specifically for you guys. I purchased the DVD and then ripped it, but I do not want you guys to download it and then distribute it, because that would end up getting me probably put in jail. But for your benefit, it documents the stories of classic advertising campaigns from back in the 1960s to much more recently, campaigns for Apple and for Nike, the Got Milk campaign, many of the campaigns you're familiar with, and the stories that led it to the development of these campaigns, the kinds of people that were involved, and the ideas that inspired them, the processes that they follow. So it runs about 90 minutes, and it's well worth your time to watch to get a better idea of how compelling advertising messages are developed. So the next steps in developing our integrated marketing communications plan are media and money, and we refer to them together because they're inextricably linked, because different types of media cost varying amounts, and so we have to make a cost-benefit analysis in choosing which media we include in our plan, and also based on the kinds of media that our target group consume. So it's important for us to understand how communication works between people, whether it be one person and another, or a company and a group of prospective customers. We can't just assume because we present someone with a message that we want to have their attention, or that if we have their attention that they're going to understand what it is we're saying to them. Understanding who we're talking to enables us to code our messages in ways that'll be relevant to them. And coding means using symbols to communicate ideas. Those symbols can mean letters that form words. Every culture has them. Those are common features of cultures, is that they've agreed on sets of symbols that represent ideas so that they can communicate with each other. Those symbols could be graphical, could be photographs, could be icons. You think about the Nike swoosh or the McDonald's golden arches or the Apple apple, the BMW white and blue propeller. All of those symbols have meaning to us because of advertising. And it's interesting to think about how advertising has enriched our culture, our various cultures, because advertising oftentimes creates those symbols and fills them with meaning. And so as marketers, we have to understand our audience and then use symbols that'll be relevant to them. And different generations have and share different memories and symbols that evoke meaning to them that we have to be sensitive to. So if we're marketing across cultures, across national boundaries, we have to do our homework to ensure that the words and the ideas that we invoke in communicating our message have relevance and communicate the ideas that we intend them to communicate. And all of that communication is happening, it's influenced by the experiences of the people that we're speaking to, and we're communicating in the presence of noise. We are bombarded with sensory stimulation all day long, whether it's advertising, messaging, or just the ambient noise in whatever environment that you're in. If you stopped right now and pause what I was saying, just listened to the noise in your environment, even if there's no one talking, no music playing, there's still a lot of noise from ventilation systems, and noise from electronic equipment. And all of that serves to reduce the amount of available attention that our customers have to dedicate to paying attention to our advertising messages, much less assuming that they even care what it is that we have to say to them. If you've seen the movie Minority Report, it's an interesting movie to watch if you have some time, but there's a scene where Tom Cruise, our hero, is walking through a mall in the future. So maybe let's say 10, 20 years in the future. And as he walks down this corridor, there are cameras which scan his eye, and using biometrics, they're able to identify exactly who he is, and that links into his purchase history, and he is served up ads, three-dimensional ads, based on things he's purchased in the past, which may or may not be embarrassing for him, but he's just inundated with all these commercial messages wherever he goes, something that's relevant to him, because it's very much like Amazon. When you go onto Amazon and it records your purchase history, it recommends things based on that history. Well, that's this idea of the future of advertising, that it is so invasive you can't get away from it. Now, as marketers, we also have to wrestle with those ethical issues. Do any of us want to live in a situation like that, where there is no commercial free space? But that notwithstanding, we have to understand that as marketers, we're competing for attention, which is why it's so important that we understand who we're talking to and create messages that clearly and concisely and compellingly communicate our unique value proposition. So we have to capture their intention long enough to transmit a message and hope that they will remember it. And this idea of learning and memory and retention has its basics, the process has a neurological analog in your nervous system. So, and that's a wonderful thing, because if you remembered every bit of stimulation that you were exposed to, it would be overwhelming, and you would quickly run out of space in your brain to store all those memories. Fortunately, our brains are wired in such a way that they can ignore a lot of stimulation and focus on the things that really matter. So again, our job as marketers is to overcome that biological impediment, and through creative, visually arresting advertising, getting our message in the right place at the right time in front of the right person, so that our messages do capture their attention and that they are memorable. So again, that first concept we want to think about is exposure. So in order for our message to prompt behavior, again, whether it's to visit a website, make a phone call, go to an event, ultimately purchase a product, or refer a friend, we first have to expose that person to our message. So and we have a lot of options. We've seen earlier, we have a lot of different media that we can choose, whether it's online or outdoor or direct mail or email or a person. Those are all different ways that we use to expose that person, that group to our message. And we're going to talk about these concepts of reach and frequency because these are our ideas, our concepts that we use when we're evaluating which media that we should choose in our media plan based on how much of our audience those different types of media connect with and what it costs to use them. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to take out an ad, let's say on a website, ESPN, but we can only afford to run it one day, and in the hopes that a large portion of our audience will visit the site on that day, and if they visit the site, they'll see our ad. Most likely, they won't. They won't be on the site that particular day, and if they are on that site, they'll be looking for something else. They'll ignore or not see our ad. So we need our ad, our message, to appear frequently enough to increase the odds that at some point they'll see it, and see it multiple times, because the first time they see it, they might not process it deeply. But when they see it the second time, something in their brain tells them, you've seen this before, here it is again, maybe you should pay attention to it. And by virtue of that repetition, we create we gain a position in their memory. So once we've exposed them to our message, then we have to get their attention. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of things competing for attention. Certainly our competitors' advertisements are competing for their attention. So acquiring that, locking in their attention onto our message is a function of how we present it to them. So that brings us to exploring our media options. Certainly the dropping a message in a bottle and throwing it into the ocean, hoping that someday it arrives at their doorstep is one way, but that takes a very long time and it's very expensive. We don't have that much time. We need options that can get our message in front of our audiences more quickly and more cost efficiently, and with a greater degree of reliability. The textbook provides an interesting case in Tata's Nano launch, the initial launch of their automobile, and that initially Tata faltered when they first came out. Certainly there were some product issues. The car catching on fire didn't lend any great credibility to its initial success, but there was also an advertising problem where Tata was advertising, positioning the value of the car as a replacement for a bicycle. So they had so trimmed out all the different elements that made an automobile expensive and brought it down to a price point that a rural Indian family could possibly afford this. But they were using advertising media that targeted an entirely different demographic, using social media and various forms of online media that these rural target customers weren't connected to. And so that also contributed to the Nano's initial failure in the marketplace. And when they understood what they had done wrong, when they understood that it wasn't simply enough to have a good product, they had to properly position the marketplace and understand who they were communicating with and design a media plan that connected with those people and that communicated the right message, that it wasn't just, this is a cheap car because all of us aspire to something better than what we have. And so when Tata changed the presentation to a more aspirational approach, get good-looking, youthful, successful people on their way up, that it led to a much greater degree of success than they had experienced at that point in time. I wish we were all together right now so that some of you who have background with this particular product could enrich our understanding of what Tata has done in the years subsequent. So we talked about these different media options that are available. We're going to look at them in a little bit more detail and examine them based on this idea of reach and frequency and cost and then compatibility. So reach has to do with the percentage of our target market that any one media tactic connects with. So let's say that we are a hotel and our target market is our business travelers and from the United States, and we will want to narrow that even further to executives or C-level executives at Fortune 1000 companies. That'd be a little more precise. So we've got to find media that those C-level executives at Fortune 1000 companies are exposed to, they come into contact with. And there are a variety of ways that we can do that. Most media, whether it's offline or online, is audited by third-party organizations which tell us of the people that receive these publications or subscribe to these websites or visit these websites. They can give us some demographic information, so we can know their job titles, their industry occupations, their income, certainly if they're subscription-based sites. And now with the wealth of information that we've collected from people's web search behavior, we can connect with financial purchase transactions with web search behavior and get much more detailed insights into who's visiting certain websites and what they're looking for. So when we're looking at any medium in particular, we want to see how much of the group that I want to connect with does this website, does this magazine, does this event, does this television channel, does this show on this channel connect with, to make sure that it reaches a significant amount. And it helps me to compare one medium to another. If magazine A reaches 50% of my group and charges $5,000 for a full page ad, and publication B reaches 60% of my group and also charges $5,000 for a full page ad, publication B represents a better value for me because they reach a larger number, a larger percentage of my audience at the same price. Frequency. The premise of frequency is that it takes more than one touch, one contact or exposure to prompt a behavior. Research isn't conclusive as exactly how many times. Some will say it takes 7 contacts with a customer before they make a purchase decision. All we know for sure from the research is that it varies by product and by industry, by whether it's business to business or business to consumer, and the type of purchase decision, whether it's a low level involvement like a commodity product, a toothpaste, or whether it's a high level of involvement, an automobile, a house, a computer, something like that, affect the number of times, the number of contacts you made. But regardless of the specific number, we know that it takes a multiple of some kind. And so when we're planning our media buy, we have to think about maximizing our frequency to increase the odds that that person will see the message, they'll be exposed to it, and eventually they'll pay some attention to it, remember it, and respond to it. Impression is, as you can see, they put the definition here on the slide, but impression is a measure of potential exposure. So if you visit a website and an ad pops up, you may or may not pay any attention to it. The website will register and report to the advertiser that the ad was displayed, and that is one impression. It doesn't mean that the person paid any attention to it, doesn't mean that they clicked on it, it just means that they were exposed to it. You drive down the freeway and you see a billboard, you look up at it, that's an impression. Now, of course, we don't know, we don't have the technology installed on all these outdoor, the technology exists, it's just too expensive to deploy it at the kind of scale that we would need to. But so we don't know if when you drive by that board you look or not. All we know is the board is there and you are there, and we're hoping that a connection will be made. It's not a spectacularly reliable measure, but it is a good way of comparing one media option to another. So if I'm thinking of buying advertising time on television, where the cost per 1,000 impressions, or it's also known as CPM, may be $2 versus an online ad delivered to a specific set of homes based on their internet protocol address is $10. Depending on the budget I have available and what my goals are, the TV option might make more sense. So again, cost per 1,000 impressions is a measurement, a metric we can use to evaluate and compare media options. The most important concept is conversion. Conversion is when the customer behaves in the way that we want them to. So ultimately, of course, that's the purchase. But as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of intermediate steps that we can bring them to. So it's not just like we can expect that we're going to say, here's our product, buy it. It might take a series of escalating decisions. So the first step might be they see our ad and we invite them to visit a page on our website where they can watch a video, or they can download some information, they can get something for free, whatever the incentive is, and they fill out a form to get that thing. Now we have their information, so now we can send them an email and invite them to an event. And so we bring them through that series of decisions with the purpose of escalating their commitment to us, ultimately culminating in the purchase of a product. As we plan our media plan, sort of be redundant, we also want to think about seasonality effects and timing. There are certain products that lend themselves to certain days, time of the day, and certain days of the week. So in higher education, it's an area that I've got experience in, I know people like you who are leaning forward into your lives and interested in self-improvement, career advancement. You start the week out with goals and plans and lists, and as the week moves on and you're moving towards Friday and the weekend, you're thinking less about building your career and more about relaxing in your weekend. So knowing that, and that I know because I've got years of activity, responses to advertising, especially through our website, I can see that there are peaks and troughs of interest and activity, that the best time for me to give you my message about advancing your career and your life by virtue of advancing your education is Monday through Thursday, early Thursday. But it would be a waste of my advertising budget to advertise that same product to you on Friday afternoon when you're thinking about just falling forward through the end of the day and moving into the recreational part of your week. Not that I don't do that, but as you're trying to be economical and efficient with your media plan, you do think about these things and when is the best time for me to communicate. So all these different concepts, whether it's day of time, time of the day, day of the week, time of the year. Again, certain products have seasonality that's measured on an annual scale, so we also need to take that into account. We need to consider whether we have a necessary budget to have just a continuous campaign that runs consistently 12 months out of the year, or whether we flight our campaign. So in that situation, we might say in the first quarter of each year, we're going to have a very high level of frequency because we know that's when people are most interested. But in the second quarter of the year, we know that they are not as interested. So if we're selling toys, we know that in the fourth quarter of the year, there's going to be a lot of interest in toys because we're moving into the Christmas holidays. But in the first quarter of the year, those same customers have spent that income and are now more interested in finding out how to pay off their credit cards, not as interested in buying more toys. So it would be better for us to spend a majority of our budget in the fourth quarter of the year than in the first quarter of the year. So just running through, I'm not going to go through all of these because you can scroll through these slides as well, but each of our media options are general categories of options bring with them certain strengths and liabilities. Certainly with television, we have the very compelling ability to engage not just sight, but also sound. And there are a number of companies and universities that are working on developing technologies that will engage sense of smell. So depending on what it is that you're watching, that may or may not be a great thing. Of course, TV is a very noisy medium, and now with the availability of DVRs and streaming media that don't have commercial subscription services, it's making media planning and using television far more challenging, but it's also a benefit in the sense that the proliferation of these different channels and specialty channels enables us to target with a much higher level of precision than we were able to before, when it was basically, in the United States at least, there were 3 major broadcast networks and those are your choices. And now we've got hundreds of different channels. And we also have streaming services which are producing their own content, which increases the need for us to find ways to get our products placed and featured within the content of those shows, which is how TV advertising started back in the 1940s and 50s. Radio is another option that is considered a traditional media tactic that has its own strengths and its liabilities. It can be a very geographically localized tactic, but again, with the proliferation of internet and satellite radio options and radio analytics are very rudimentary and, in my opinion, unreliable, which makes radio a bit more of a gamble than some of the other media tactics, just because it's so much more difficult to determine which stations are reaching which demographic groups. We can get some idea based on the music they're playing and the radius of their signal. That gives us some idea. And radio advertising typically is fairly cost effective, but again, the lack of good measurement analytics makes it, in my opinion, not the best investment. Outdoor, I'll give you a chance to reflect on that visual there. Sorry about that. Outdoor is a great venue to, as you can see here in this example, to explore and expose big ideas and messages. So if we're trying to create a certain image for our company, for our brand, outdoor is a great option, particularly in highly populated areas where there's a lot of traffic. Of course, in the Empire, we do a lot of driving, so outdoor works well for us because people are moving back and forth in the freeways so much. Our outdoor advertising gets a lot of visibility. It's expensive, and again, it's not the kind of medium that lends itself to direct response. People aren't pulling off the freeway and going to websites or logging into their social media accounts to respond to our advertising messages. So typically outdoor is a good venue for image-based advertising, but not such a great medium if we're trying to get a short-term response. Magazines, again, there's as many magazines as there are interests, and so we can be very precise in our targeting, but of course print media readership has been declining for years, especially in some of the younger demographics, and so it brings into question the validity of print advertising. But there still is a place for it, and print advertising is one of the best audited forms of advertising media available, in the sense that most business to consumer magazines, many business to business magazines are required to have their readership analyzed on a regular basis, and we as advertisers can review those reports to ensure that the people who that they say receive these magazines are in fact receiving them, that they want them, they're paying for them, so that if we know that people want the magazines that they're receiving, that we have a pretty good sense that they'll see our advertisements in those magazines. And then newspapers, of course, we know the sad state that newspapers are in, but they still remain a good tactic for older audiences. Affluent and more educated audiences are still reading newspapers, and certainly they have a very short shelf life, depending on how frequently they're published. If it's a daily, of course, yesterday's newspaper becomes completely irrelevant and replaced by today's newspaper, and so does the advertising that you have in it. So if you do newspaper, you have to have enough budget to have frequency where people will see it on that short window of time. Online gives us a dizzying array, and it increases in its scope and complexity just about every day, but some of our most targeted and interactive options as well. Think about how easy it is to click on a Google AdWord link or on a display ad, even though the click-through rates for display ads, banner ads that you see on websites are usually in the tenths or hundredths of percent relative to the number of times that people see them. But still some very useful options here, and the costs are much lower. And we're going to look through some of these in more detail as we go on. Public relations is also a tactic that we want to consider when we think about our media plan. One of the unique strengths that public relations, or just simply PR, brings to the table is that it gives our message a sense of credibility. So if I say something about my product to you, you might be skeptical because I'm trying to sell you something. You know that you're being sold. So you'll put those defense mechanisms up to filter out what I'm saying. But if someone else, someone that you think is unbiased, a journalist, a reporter, says something positive about what I have to offer you, then it gives it a sense of credibility, and you're more willing to accept those claims because they come from someone other than me. And so that's one of the values of public. Now, public relations can mean relating to a variety of publics. What I'm referring to here is primarily relating to news media. There's also public affairs, which is engaging with government entities to influence legislation. There's interaction with community groups, community affairs. There's engagement with your own employees and employee affairs. So, but when we think about advertising and promotion, we're thinking primarily about engaging with the news or business analyst media and using them to communicate our message. Certainly, the challenges you have there is that they have their own mind and their agendas too, and they might not report on what we have to offer the way that we want them to. So there's a certain risk involved in engaging in this particular tactic, but it certainly has its place in just about any media plan. So again, which is best? It depends again on your the audience you're communicating with. Again, choosing media that are relevant and connect with your audiences. Again, like we looked at with Tata and with their nano launch, targeting rural families who don't have internet connectivity using social media. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So, and also on the type of message we're communicating. If it's something that is time sensitive, then putting it up in a billboard or in a magazine that might not be printed for a month or two in advance may not make the most sense. But if we have time, those traditional types of media may make sense. So typically what we're doing is we're diversifying our plan and using multiple media as opposed to just having all of our eggs, as the figure of speech goes, in one basket. And the research does show that there is a synergistic or a complementary effect that occurs when we employ two or more media to communicate the same message. So what we often do at CBU is we use outdoor, because again, so many of our prospective customers are driving a lot. And so we know they'll come into contact with these boards in close proximity to our campuses, but we also know that they're online a lot and they're using social media. So we invest in social media and search engine optimization. So when people are searching for products that we have to offer, we can use products like or services like Google AdWords to ensure that when they search for the services that we have to offer, that we appear in those listings. This is an example of a media plan that I create each year that I use to coordinate the efforts of my team in the marketing unit, but also that I can share with our sales group and the rest of the organization so they understand the advertising activity and the investments that we're making to support our sales efforts and to support the marketing activities of the different parts of the organization. That's another important part in doing this, is coordinating with the rest of the organization. The last M in our planning process is measurement. And that's critical because the marketing function needs to be able to demonstrate the value that it contributes to the organization, the return that its investments are contributing back to the company's operation, which has historically been very challenging to do. But there are a few things that we can do that will enable us to report back to the executives, particularly in the financial side, the kind of return that their investments in marketing are yielding for them. So the first step in being able to measure results and understand if we're making progress is to understand where we are at right now. And that is something that most companies don't do. If they do measure, then they are measuring against a floating reference point because they haven't taken the time to establish benchmarks. And so what you're seeing here is one type of benchmark. In fact, what you saw on the previous slide was a social media monitoring. It's a system that we use here called Sprout Social that enables us to monitor our Facebook and Twitter activity, and also Instagram, which provides us an ability to see how not just followers, which is one measure of social media progress, but more importantly, sharing where our content is being passed along, and the value of that content grows exponentially as our followers share it with their followers. Another thing you can measure, establish benchmarks for, are perceptions. And as an example here, nearly 10 years ago now, we did here at CBU did a benchmark perception survey that included current students at that time, alumni, employees, and a few other stakeholder groups. And we wanted to find out how well they understood CBU's mission, how they would characterize CBU, and gave them lists of different adjectives that they could use to describe CBU, depending on whether they thought those adjectives were relevant or not, and a variety of other types of measurements. And then we went back 3 years later and measured against those same measurements to see if we were making progress in the areas that were important to us. And you can see here the brown columns represent the March 2007 survey, where the blue columns represent the same survey that was repeated to the same groups, so that we could see if we were making progress in areas that were important to us. And just looking here, we can see that we made progress along every measurement, but some areas not as much. We see, and this is probably no surprise to you, the affordably priced, we made slight improvement on, but this gives an idea of areas that we need to make an emphasis on based on the importance that our customers place on these different attributes. When we were getting ready to launch a campaign in Phoenix, Arizona, an area that we had not done a lot of promotion into in the past, this is a couple years ago now, before we did any type of advertising there, we need to establish a benchmark level of awareness so that we could go back after the campaign and see if we had moved the needle, if awareness and preference had increased relative to where it was before the campaign started. And so what you're seeing on the screen now is examples of some of the different tactics. We had outdoor ads around the Phoenix metro area. We did targeted emails targeting juniors and seniors in high school that were looking for college. And we knew this because we work with media companies that access Google search metadata and are able to determine IP addresses that are looking for college. And then we can correlate those IP addresses to email addresses and then send emails to those recipients whose age and search behavior indicate that they're in the market for what we have to sell. We did banner advertising, you can see on the left side, and the messaging, just to bring back that idea of developing a message. We understood the competition we had in Phoenix. We had the state systems, ASU, and then University of Arizona. We also had a up-and-comer, very aggressive up-and-comer in Granite County University who were presenting themselves as an affordable Christian college. And so we thought, well, rather than try to recreate a live your purpose concept for CBU from the start in Arizona, why not establish a position relative to an entity that the market was already aware of and show how we were different and superior. And so that's why we came up with this tagline, which is not terribly exciting, but hopefully informative and delivering the value proposition clearly that we are an affordable Christian college. The difference is we're in California, not out in the middle of the desert. And so we launched the campaign. Before the campaign launch, we worked with an agency in Arizona to deploy a survey to 50,000 high school students ages 16 and 17 and 25,000 parents of high school students. And we did this through the agency so that our identity would not bias the results. And we deployed the survey, these postcards. You can see the postcard graphics on the screen here, different designs for the different audiences. And the call to action on the postcard was to go to a website to do the survey, and in participating in the survey, they would enter to win an iPad mini. And so, again, we did a survey before the campaign and then after the campaign, and we discovered, in terms of results, we could go back and look at our website traffic to determine if traffic had increased over that time. And what you're seeing here is a screen capture from Google Analytics that looks at traffic from major Phoenix population centers. And we could see the population year over year, so 12 months prior to the campaign and the 12 months or the period after the campaign had increased nearly 100%. So those were all good factors. I don't want to get into what all these mean, but you can see that website traffic increased dramatically after the campaign period. And more importantly, one of the questions that we asked in this survey was which California schools the parents and the students were aware of. And just asked, and we didn't give them any options. We just asked them to just from memory give us a few. And then we gave them, in the next screen, gave them of the survey, gave them a number of options. So we gave them a list they could choose from, and they could check off the ones they were familiar with. And we included some names that are nationally known, like USC and UCLA, to make sure that we weren't dealing with a really strange population, just that everyone is aware of USC and UCLA, and our survey confirmed that. And we included some of our competitors as well, so you could see how we compare to them. And as you can see, the over the time period from when the survey was deployed in August and when we redeployed it in February, awareness levels for both populations, parents and students, increased dramatically. Now, we would not have known this or been able to measure this increase had we not established a benchmark before we deployed the campaign. And of course, the most important part of that is just seeing enrollment or sales activity changes over that period of time. And we measured over a 3-year period to see, because the only thing that had changed in our marketing efforts in that geography was this campaign. So we could attribute a good chunk of the increase to the campaign itself. All right, let's move on from there. Okay, so we've talked about advertising in detail, and we want to talk about the complementary effects of sales. And at the very beginning, we looked at this chart, and to understand the balance between our budgetary constraints and our desire to get as close to our customers as possible. And we saw that advertising provides us the ability to relatively inexpensively connect with large populations of customers, but it's at a distance. It's not a intimate contact with them. It's usually mediated through some form of media, whether it's a website, a magazine, a billboard, whatever. Whereas communicating with them through a salesperson, it is intimate, it's direct, but of course that's expensive. Having a person to communicate with just one or a group of customers is an expense that a lot of companies have a problem affording. But sales does provide a level of intimacy that is critical, especially in business-to-business types of sales. And so now we have to determine, if we're going to have a sales effort, how are we going to organize a sales effort? And many companies will have inside sales departments where their advertising prompts customers to call in, or if it's a catalog-based business, those still exist, like an LL Bean. So they're drawing customers to contact them, as opposed to an outside sales organization where we send salespeople out into the field, which is how pharmaceutical sales are typically done. With pharmaceutical sales reps, go visit doctors' offices to create awareness and trial use or recommendation of their new products. Many larger business-to-business companies will organize their sales organizations by industry. This is what IBM does, organizing their sales by industry categories like financial services and healthcare and aerospace, government sectors, defense. And so by doing that, they enable their sales teams to specialize in those industries and provide a higher level of value, especially important in consultative type selling. Or you might organize your sales teams by geography so that they can more efficiently manage those geographic territories, as opposed to having someone go back and forth across continents or across the world. What we have done, and this, I know this is going to be very difficult for you to see all the detail in this graphic, but what this is showing you is the way that CBU's marketing department supports its admissions or its sales department in providing tools like emails and brochures, and of course the website and all the advertising. But what this is showing is a communications flow that you have probably been in. If you guys are about a year into your program, I think you have experienced some of this, where once you inquire, your name goes into a database, and that database is programmed to ensure that over time, as you move through the admissions process, you receive different messages. They could be postcards, they could be emails, they could be text messages, they could be phone calls, and inviting you to events, giving you more information about CBU to increase your understanding and appreciation of what we have to offer, to the intent to move you through that process from initial inquiry to application to acceptance to enrollment, and all the way through to graduation. And so this is just one example of how marketing can support a sales effort in giving the sales team communication tools and systems that they can use to more efficiently and more effectively communicate with prospective customers and existing customers too. All right, let's skip over that. Those are just different parts. All right, so that brings us to the end of our consideration of the promotion tab.